Scientists have discovered ancient forests with animals and plants they thought were extinct in several sinkholes hidden deep in the mountains. When the land collapsed, revealing steep limestone cliffs and caves.
Bottomless pits in a Kentucky cave system, haunted mines, and creepy bones picked clean by prehistoric humans. These are the most terrifying lost worlds hidden beneath the earth. Let's talk about the supposed entrances to Hollow Earth. According to the Hollow Earth theory, our planet isn't solid all the way through. Instead, it's like a giant shell, about 800 miles thick, with giant holes at the poles. These holes, around 1,400 miles across, supposedly lead you straight into the Earth's interior. If you were to fly over one of these holes, you wouldn't even know you were entering the inside of the Earth. You just keep flying like an ant walking over the lip of a coffee mug, moving from the outside to the inside without realizing it. Now, according to the theory, the reason no one has ever seen these holes is because pilots get tricked by their compasses when they fly over the poles. Instead of reaching the actual pole, they're following the magnetic rim of the hole itself, which messes with their navigation. What exactly is the origin of this Hollow Earth conspiracy? Well, it got started back in the 1800s from a guy named John Symes. Symes was an American Army officer, trader, and lecturer who spent a good chunk of his career trying to convince the world that the Earth was made of concentric shells, each one hollow, and that there were entire uncharted lands full of vegetation and animals beneath us. Some people bought into it, others laughed him off, but Symes was adamant about his ideas and even proposed an expedition to find these entrances. The plan was to go north, observe the animals that supposedly hibernated inside the Earth, and eventually follow them to find the entrance. This never happened, but the Hollow Earth theory is still talked about to this day. As we've just discussed, there are supposedly huge openings leading to the inner Earth at both poles, but there are also said to be smaller entrances hidden all over the world. Kentucky Mammoth Caves is said to be one of these entrances. This cave system has some pretty ominous sounding areas like the haunted chambers, the giant's coffin, and the bottomless pit. Back in the 1800s, guides would use these names to help people navigate, tell stories, and, attract tourists. One of the most interesting spots in Mammoth Cave was Symes Pit, named after Captain John Symes, again the guy who originally proposed the Hollow Earth theory. This pit was thought to be a possible portal to the underworld, at least that's what the guides would tell people. And did everyone believe it? No, I'm sure a lot of people laughed it off. John Symes' theory about the Earth being hollow was rejected by mainstream science even back then, but I bet in the back of their minds they wondered, especially when explorers like Robert Montgomery Bird warned visitors not to get too close to Symes Pit, that its depth is unknown, and that probably got people wondering, where exactly did it lead? The Sterling Hill Mine in Ogdensburg, New Jersey is said to be one of America's most haunted mines. This place is deep, over 2,500 feet down, and has a massive network of tunnels that stretch for miles. It opened in 1897 when the Sterling Hill Mining Company hoped to strike it rich with zinc and iron, but things didn't go quite as planned. While they didn't find the riches they expected, they did find danger, and lots of it. Over the 90 years the mine was in use, nearly 77 miners died from accidents, so it comes as no surprise that Sterling Hill Mine is now famous for its ghost stories. You can visit the abandoned mine today, but if you're a believer in the paranormal, you may not want to. People have reported hearing footsteps, strange whispers, and voices coming from the darkness of the tunnels. Some people have even said they've seen a ghostly miner carrying a lantern, wandering the tunnels like he's still on the job. Some also say they've felt unseen hands push or touch them while walking through the mine. Now, if we really want to get quirky, we can talk about the hidden chambers said to be located beneath the Denver International Airport. The Denver International Airport sounds like a pretty magical place from some of these stories I've heard about. In a bad way though, not the good kind of magic. What's said to be going on here? Well, there's alien stuff, satanic worship, an evil horse statue, creepy artwork. One of the most popular conspiracies though is that it's a secret base for the Illuminati. Just what isn't going on at the Denver International International Airport. Apparently there's a time capsule buried on the property, said to hold symbols tied to the Freemasons, who are of course rumored to have connections with the Illuminati. Even weirder, the airport's construction went way over budget and took much longer than planned, and some believe that the extra costs were covered by Illuminati money, granting them secret access to the airport. Beneath the airport, there are said to be secret bunkers, a network of tunnels that some believe hide anything from alien specimens to lizard people. These bunkers are meant to serve as safe havens for the world's elite in the event of an apocalypse. The Cheddar Gorge caves in Somerset, England are home to some very old skeletons. Cheddar Man is the most famous, a 9,000-year-old human skeleton found in the gorge in 1903. He's Britain's oldest complete human skeleton. The caves were formed by an underground river, and they're packed with stalactites and stalagmites. There are two main caves you can visit, Cobb's Cave and Cox's Cave. Cobb's Caves was discovered in 1903, the bigger of the two, and goes deep into the rock. Cox's Cave was discovered a bit earlier, in 1837. It's smaller, but still has some amazing details. Now, some believe these caves were used for aging cheese in prehistoric times, but that may not be all that our early ancestors were eating back in the day. They've also found bones that have some disturbing marks on them. They show signs of having been scraped clean, meaning they were eaten, and not by wild animals, but by other humans. Life in prehistoric times was brutal, and it seems that survival sometimes meant resorting to extreme measures. The Cave of Horrors, found near the Dead Sea in Israel, has earned its eerie nickname for a pretty good reason. Back in the 60s, researchers found the remains of 40 Jewish people inside, killed by Roman soldiers in the 2nd century. Then in 2021, fragments of the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered inside. These scrolls have been turning up in caves all around the Dead Sea since the 40s, but the discovery of new fragments just a few years back, that's pretty huge. But the find wasn't just exciting, it was pretty macabre too, because they were found alongside the mummified remains of a young girl, about 6,000 years old. These scroll fragments are incredibly valuable, not just because of their age, but because they might hold secrets about early Jewish culture, religion, and even forgotten ancient texts. Oak's Pit is an abandoned mine near Barnsley in England. Back in 1866, a horrific disaster claimed the lives of 361 workers and rescuers. An explosion caused by fire damp, which is a gas found in coal mines, set off an underground fire that lasted for days, destroying everything in its path. The whole place collapsed, with about 100 tons of coal falling into a massive crater at the entrance. The disaster was so devastating, and it's still considered one of the worst mining tragedies in British history. But what makes Oak's Pit even creepier is what happened years later. In recent years, a group of paranormal investigators, Paranormal X, decided to check out this site. They used a Ouija board, a haunted doll, and other ghost detecting equipment that I'm just not educated enough to describe, to try and make contact with whatever might still be trapped down there. In the end, they concluded that the land itself was cursed. The legend of White Boots comes from the San Manuel Magma copper mine in Arizona, but it's a ghost story that's been told in mines all around the world. The tale goes back to the early days of the mine, where miners spoke of a ghostly figure that wandered the underground, a spirit known as White Boots. The story of White Boots began when a miner was killed in an accident. His body was horribly mutilated, his upper half was found, but his legs were never recovered. Now, not long after this, miners started telling each other that they'd see a pair of white boots walking, or some would even say floating, along the mine's tunnels and tracks, almost like they were searching for the missing body. They also started seeing lights from distant workers, only to discover that no one was actually working on their level. One miner even claimed he worked alongside a man he'd never seen before, only to later find out that no one else had been working in his area at all. The mine itself had a long history of deadly accidents, including one in 1956 where a miner was killed by runaway ore cars. Stories of white boots became so common that when something went wrong, like equipment malfunctioning, the workers would blame white boots or one of the other suspected spirits in the mine. Continuing on with San Manuel Magma copper mine for a minute though, there's a story from a former miner that is just too eerie not to share. One former worker, Ernest Granillo, told of a time when he was almost crushed by a rock, only to feel someone pull him to safety, but no one else was there. In his exact words, "In August 1966, I was working for Magma Copper as a chute tapper, waiting for the POTUS to send me greetings. I was on the graveyard shift. About an hour into the shift, I was preparing preparing to move to the next grizzly in my line, I followed all the safety precautions, putting in control boards and placing a board across the grizzly. As I proceeded across the grizzly, a rock large enough to cover the grizzly and about 2 feet high crashed out of the drop point through the control board and onto the grizzly. That precise moment, I felt someone grab me and pull me across the grizzly, but there was no one there but me. Under the streets of Columbia, South Carolina, is a network of catacombs that no one really knows the full story. The eerie tunnels were built in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as the city grew. Initially, they were meant for practical use like storage, but as time passed, rumors started. Some people believe the catacombs were also used during Prohibition for bootlegging. Others think they were secret spots for hiding stolen goods or even holding covert meetings for political groups. There's even talk of more sinister uses, though no one can confirm anything for sure. The catacombs are off limits, and most of the entrances are sealed or hidden away. Now, while some areas have been explored, large portions of the catacombs haven't and are still a complete mystery. So with all that said, I've been your host, James, and I'll catch you, yes, you specifically, in the next video.